thing to look at us ourselves and think, okay, so hung prayers we're praying bad for other people out of jealousy, manipulation, or envy, and so when I spoke to this fellow who's a chairperson for a university, and I said to him, one of the spiritual people who served time in Vietnam, who had a hard time adjusting to civilian life, had talked about hung prayers and how people say bad things about people and how those prayers get hung onto the person's spirit. And he said there was an elderly man who died, and people in the community were just afraid of him. They didn't want to come into his house. They didn't want to prepare his body for burial, death, nothing. So he said he went in there, blessed the house, blessed the man's corpse, prepared the body and the grave site, everything. He said after the man was buried, all through ceremony and ritual, he said the funeral home director approached him and he says, I saw what you did. I want you to come to the funeral home. I want to show you something. And he says, when I've been preparing these bodies, of indigenous people, he says these objects have come out, dropped on from the floor, dropped on the floor from their bodies, and these were objects, different types of objects, little pieces, like pieces with hair or bone or something attached to it. And he says I've collected them over the years. And he had mason jars full of them. He says I didn't. He says I've collected them. I don't know what to do with them. He says, I want to give it to you. He says, I didn't see this happening to other people except this one tribe. He says, until immigrants came in from another country. And then I saw this other tribe. They're dead. These objects were falling out of their bodies. So this fellow said, well, those are hung prayers. See, so understand the manifestation of that. I was totally in denial of I use the concept of limerence, but it is a form of hung prayers against ourselves. And until we understand limerence, it's one thing to have infatuation and to be infatuated. It's another thing to confront the person that is manipulating you into believing somebody's in love with you for their own gain. Okay, that's not hung prayers. That's just manipulation. But if you believe the narrative and you don't confront it, then you're hanging your own prayers on yourself. And you can get stuck in that, and it becomes limerent. So for me, like I mentioned, I don't know, I've got to reconnect all of my blogs or my podcasts because I've been shutting them. I've been trying to finish this podcast, and yet each time something happens and my recording stops, either accidentally or whatever. But the reality of it is, like I said, I was promiscuous when I was younger. And when I talk to men about this, they kind of smile. And I'm going, no, society allows men to be promiscuous. And they say, oh, you're good, you're handsome, you've got all this sexual energy, good for you, sowing your wild oats. I say to those men, what is it about women that women are not allowed to be promiscuous? And yet it's the same psychological, again, that's the way we heal. So for me, when I had encountered a soldier who had escaped, didn't go back to Vietnam to fight, a deserter, I had sex with him. It was like I was being promiscuous, and so was he. I could have tried, I could have begged, I could have, it was so enjoyable. I could have been addicted to that man. There was a gut feeling. I walked away. And as much as it hurt emotionally, I did. And that's part of healing. Because at that moment I realized that I'm not praying bad on myself. I'm not allowing somebody to hurt me. I'm trying to understand who I am and what it is in this life that I'm doing. So the irony of it is, even though I talk about limerence, it's far more complicated than what like what the whole establishment of support groups like AA or Al-Anon or like support groups. Much of this was sort of studied by psychologists and people who studied indigenous ways in the Americas. And they adopted this support system of holistic and collective approaches to healing through narratives. The reality, though, is like it's a false construct, because the people who are participating haven't known each other from childhood, from babies, childhood to teenagers to adults to parents to grandparents. It's a holistic collective approach, which only these narratives like AA or support system or like call it cult-like can exist. And it is, but until you bring it into a situation where you know the people from childhood to death, that it's not a cult. It's a collective, holistic way of approaching things. Because within the system, we start to identify who we were as children, as teenagers, young adults, seniors. It goes. So the reality of hung prayers or praying bad for ourselves is the inability to walk away. To walk away and to actually have the courage to actively do something. Because karma is an action word. And so again, what is the difference between, like, okay, yeah, we hang prayers on ourselves, but at the same time, there are people who actually do pray bad for other people. And so how do we, like the fellow who taught me this had killed quite a few men in Vietnam. Now, no doubt the man I had sex with when I was 19 years old had killed men in Vietnam as well, because I couldn't understand like why it was so easy for him to walk away. But when this lesson was taught to me by this Lakota man, he says when people talk bad about another person, he says that's how easy it is to kill a human being. So when this man that I had sex with, when I heard him say something bad, I didn't even know it was gonna come out of his mouth. I just felt it maybe minutes before, and I had to call him over to let him know. Like I just had moments to say something. If I didn't grab it at that moment, anything else I would have said would have been like a hung prayer, because that's what I thought. No, I've got to say it so it isn't a hung prayer. Whatever happens afterwards, that's like this is the only time I have. I knew that I was going to walk away. I just knew it. Now, throughout my life, even when it came to confronting the football player that this roommate had lied about, my grandfather, my grandparents really loved me, and he used to put me on his lap and sing to me, and his nickname for me was Football because I was round like a football. And the year I was born, he attended the Grey Cup in Ottawa, I think, or someplace in Ontario. And so that was his nickname for me, was Football. Never realizing like this whole limerence and this whole identity of like stopping hung prayers was also part of this football player. And for me, talking to him and getting the skinny on how he really felt about me. Like, and the thing is, like, yes, he told me he wasn't interested in me, but I kept the narrative going so that I would keep women at bay from pressuring me into dating or, we'll say, fucking around. I just knew I had to go to school, I had to go to work, I had to just focus and look after myself. I didn't really understand systemic racism. I didn't understand limerence, or I understood infatuation, but I didn't know the extent of uh, how it was connected to trauma. That being said, though, I do realize that a lot of this abstract ways of thinking is so foreign to non-Indigenous people. So I try to have some discourse about it and say this is the way it is. If you pray bad for somebody to have something bad happen to them, they have hung prayers on them. If they're not protecting themselves through prayer, then those hung prayers can get attached to them. And again, too, if you're not trying to eliminate your own self-defeating behavior, then it's basically open season for people to hang those prayers on you so easily. So it's a compound double-edged sword. As an individual protecting your identity, that one side has to do with the reactive side of here and now, and the other side of the sword is the deactivated part, where it's based on memory and the collective consciousness of how you treated the person you were sexually active with, a husband, a boyfriend, a lover, a promiscuous partner. Those things play a crucial role in how you interact with people on a day-to-day basis, especially when you find, like for me, throughout my life, I've had various infatuations. Like, I think the first infatuation were cowboys, because all my uncles and my dad were cowboys. Calf roper, like just gorgeous, gorgeous cowboys. Yeah, infatuation. Never really acted on it in the sense of, having a relationship. Because again, too, it would have been through manipulation rather than just infatuation. And if it went through manipulation, then it would have been associated with limerence. Okay, so that's the first. Then again, it moved into I think there was a little period of hockey players that moved into football players when I lived in the United States, and then just men who did workshops. I never was really into anything like authoritative, like police, professional people, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. No, I think my infatuation or my limerence infatuation was like really, like I'm just trying to say it. Whenever I felt infatuated, I would have to have a dialogue with the person, because if I knew I didn't have a dialogue, that infatuation would turn into limerence. Again, I didn't understand I'm praying bad for myself, because it's a self-defeating behavior based on illusion or delusional ways of thinking, because putting myself in limerence was a false way of saying, oh, I'm loved. Now, who the hell said that I wasn't loved? Growing up in systemic racism, when I had little white boys calling me ugly, squaw, wagon burner, and were afraid of me. Not because I was ugly and a monster, because I was really tough, like physically tough. I chopped wood. I was a outdoor survivalist type of child. I didn't have to pretend to be something I'm not. So I think that's why when I see politics in the United States and I see Trump with his pretendian narrative about who he is, and I'm going, oh, this poor man, how sad that he hasn't lived a life. Like I know how to I know how to rope a horse. I know how to make a bit out of a rope for a horse. I know how to satch up a saddle. I could ride bareback. I know how to skin a rabbit. I know how to skin a deer. I know how, like, there are certain survival skills that I grew up with. and the fear of riding full gallop bareback, or just the just the embracing life, like breathing it. That there are people out there who make millions and are billionaires who haven't lived life. It's sad. And they create this narrative that is so self-defeating about themselves based on how people, or the perception of how they want people to see them. Now, that's just basic 101 when it comes to people in terms of balance, that they're so unbalanced even as they age. That's why when I talk about my podcast and I talk about taking what healthy human sexuality is, and I said like a double-edged sword. On one side, there's the reactive side of just talking to another human being about human sexuality, about even talking about my own sexual experience with a man, or him talking to me about the first time, like that he saw porn, or he stole an object, or like for me, oh yeah, I had sex with this guy. Adult talk, that's reactive. That's the other side of the sword. The other side of the sword is the sexual attraction that all human beings innately are empowered and given that right as a human being. When our memory isn't one of the joy of sex, that whole book, The Joy of Sex, that's the other part of the double-edged sword. That's why the narrative about talking about infatuation and knowing the difference between infatuation and limerence, again, the double-edged sword, one half and the other half. If you do not have balance in that, and you don't understand the difference, and if you cannot see the flavor or the empowerment that you get in understanding who you are and the actions that you made in your life to make you who you are today, those things are vital in terms of energy, in terms of a collective holistic approach of healing. So much of my podcast and even talking about self-motivation, and again, people want to use the word negative and positive in terms of the double-edged sword. I just don't think there's a positive or negative in the sense. It's like a triangle. Like there's one side and there's another side, but there's a balance in between that we're constantly dancing every day of our lives when we meet people. It's not set in stone. It's not, of course, it's not set in stone. It's not set in stone in the sense that when you're in a relationship, and all of a sudden you fall out of love. That's not set in stone. We are human beings with a lot of frailties, a lot of innuendos, a lot of fluidity, the concepts of who we feel and what we feel. We have little to say about it because, again, it's based on who we are, what makes us balanced. It has nothing to do with manipulation or evil. I didn't even want to use the word evil. Again, when I use that, it's like positive and negative, and I don't like the duality of it because there's when you talk about duality, it's like it's either or, but it isn't. It's fluid. It's like movement. It's energy. So like relax, close your eyes, think about being in a dark room, no sound, and then think again like your eyes are closed and there's nothing around, and all of a sudden you're hearing people come in. Your eyes are still closed, it's dark, and you hear people come in sitting around you. And you know there's going to be someone coming in the middle of this crowd of people. And you hear it. All you see is darkness, but you know there's motion happening. And you see and you understand that this person that comes in is going to be wrapped up and tied up. And they're going to have people there who are going to look at this person as if they're at a funeral, like as if they're going to prepare this person for burial. But really what they're doing is preparing this person to be the conduit of energy. Because what they're tying up is his energy, his or her energy. And what you're witnessing is your life reflecting back on all the decades of what and who you've been. So I want you to think about that. Look again, it's all dark. There's nothing around. All you hear is this commotion. And all of a sudden, you hear people singing. Okay, in this sense, they're singing. And then in the sense, you hear the person who's wrapped up talking. And the person is talking as if Creator and the grandfathers and grandmothers are listening to this person. And everybody in the room, again, are in the same position. They can't see no light. They can't see each other. They just know that there's others existing in the same room. And then all of a sudden you see lights and flashing and you hear sounds. You hear an elk trampling through the center of the room and giving out a big yell. You hear eagle feathers coming, wiping against your face or fluttering above you. You hear things. You hear little twerks and stuff. And then again, too, there'll be burning smudge or whatever in this whole darkness. I want you to understand this. The person and what you see and what your senses are, that's like what? Smell, you feel, touch, see, speak. All those are captivated in this dark room. You're not able to use them. So what the hell are you seeing and what the hell are you experiencing? Basically, you're seeing the balance of everybody. That phenomena, what you're hearing, that's a collective, holistic entrapment, collective of all the energy of the people who are in that space. All those people created that. And you're thinking, oh, it's coming from the individual who's talking. No, it's coming for the people who are participating. If you think it's the individual who's being wrapped, then you know that you're not balanced. You haven't. There's something in terms of hung prayers that you have to deal with. But when you realize like it's a collective holistic approach, then you know you're balanced. You know there are no hung prayers. You know that you're in a good relationship. You know that you're in love with your partner, and everything is healing. So when the ceremony is over and the singing is done and the prayers are done and people have talked and the lights turn on, the person who's been wrapped up, if everything has been in balance, you will not feel sexual energy from that individual, because the sexual energy has manifested itself in the balance of the individuals who've been taking part in this ritual and ceremony. These things have been handed down for thousands and thousands of years in kinships and how we deal and talk with each other's energy rather than talking or speaking or seeing or feeling. That's why it's important as human beings, no matter how much we think we have fallen in love or how much we love our partners, this fluctuation, this energy, this flow, finding and seeking balance is vital to our happiness. So those are the lessons I've learned. And this is why, for me, when I try to pray for protective healing energy, for a human being that I'm attracted to in infatuation, I pray for protective healing energy for their mind, heart, spirit, and soul, because I don't want it to turn into limerence. And I release them with protective, reflective healing energy from any self-defeating illusion or delusion of anything he, she, or whoever the prayer is for, is is there with the guidance of the grandfathers and grandmothers and creator and grandfathers and grandmothers' will is being done. So these things are spiritual practices that I believe in, and it's taken a long time to distinguish and understand what hung prayers are. A lot of people didn't realize and didn't quite understand, like this teacher who has passed away. He said that's how easy it is to kill a human being. When you talk bad about another human being, that's how easy it is. So even when we talk bad about ourselves and how we do this to ourselves and how we hang these prayers to ourselves, a lot of people talk about peeling away onion skins. Well, for me, I talk about it in terms of prayers and how they're hung within our heart, mind, spirit, and soul. These things we don't have physical touch to feel or see, but they do exist. And sometimes we look at it and say, oh, well, somebody manifested it in ceremony and ritual. No, someone didn't manifest it, you did, along with a collective holistic approach. And only when you're in a group or in ceremony that you understand the empowerment that you've taken on, not the individual who's conducting the ceremony or not the individual who's observing the ceremony, but it's the participants within the ceremony itself. That's what Creator has done for us. And if we understand this approach to our own ability to find balance and understand how we feel about another human being, it's important to validate these things every day of our life. We need to protect these things for ourselves and for other people who are having a difficult time walking this journey, because we don't know what people have done to these individuals. We don't know how much pain they're carrying. So these things I try to talk about in terms of the exploitations of Nathan Chasinghorse and how easy it was for him to recruit people who were seeking this validation, and how he bastardized the whole understanding of this holistic collective approach of healing that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. Like I said, created clan systems for the Oshati Shakoi, the 7 council fires of the Sioux Nation, created O-type bloodline, universal blood donors, through matriarchy, through clan systems. Things that were how we deal with the energy of healthy human sexuality, that energy that we carry, that words, touch, smell, and sight can't comprehend. This is what Creator and grandfathers and grandmothers have gifted us with. So in that, I will close my podcast. I hope you have a good day today and understand these things that I try to do in terms of my podcast is to understand, like, I have a certain way of doing things, and there are so many other people that have different gifts and different things that are contributing to making things run in this world. Like, I made an analogy to my friend. I said, we're like ants in an ant pile. When one ant moves, everybody shifts. I said, but then you have somebody who thinks they're not an ant, and they fight the system. I said, they don't realize that they're not as bold and brave or as unique as they think they are. And it's sad, because it's Creator and grandfather's will being done. So anyway, enough of romanticism, and some people would say enough of your delusional ways of thinking. And I'm going, okay, it's delusional, thank you. But hey, I've seen life. I've gone through so many things in my life, and I continue. And I hope, as long as I can continue doing my podcasts, I think the next chapter in my life is going to be dealing more with systemic racism in fighting racism and what racism is, because it's not as clear cut as we all think it is. And at the same time, too, like when I talk about healthy human sexuality and balance, it's not all that we think it is. The psychological terms and the way psychology teaches human behavior, I try to give it in a very nonsensical approach so that you can understand it and digest it. It's not, it's something that I try to gift people rather than paying a couple of $100 and 4 months of tuition over class fee. That being said, I do get invited, and people do pay me. So there is some payment, but for me and my podcast, I do this freely, hoping that I'm able to help somebody out there who may be having a hard time understanding what love is.